Hello, welcome to the Comic Book Club. I'm your host, Jamil Payne. And with me, as always, is our purveyor of praying mantis porn, Amanda Comey. How are you doing, Amanda?
I'm doing great. The alliteration there is a blessing in dark times indeed.
Yes, yes. You know what? We actually have a lost show that we went to the explanation for that. But you know what? We're not even going to go into the explanation on why you're the purveyor of praying mantis porn. We're just
It's
going to let
funnier if we don't.
it is. So, Amanda, uh, so we lost last week's show, which was Once and Future, written by Karen Gillan. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna do a bit of a double review, but the Once and Future I think we can be truncated with just a bit, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Once and Future is a comic that I don't even have my notes in front of me for that show for last week, but Once and Future was a comic that started last year, written by Karen Gillan and drawn by Dan Moore. It's a modern day take on the Arthurian tale. Amanda, what did you think of Once and Future?
The worst possible critique I could give, which is that it's fine. Everything technically was done competently. The art is great, colors great, the story is fine. But the problem is there's so many takes on King Arthur that if you don't do something new with it, why? Why bother? Why not just make it a new fantasy story?
Right. And what do you think of the art?
Yeah, the art was great. You recognize this artist from something else you'd been reading, right? Was it Power Rangers?
Yes, yes, he's like the premier Power Ranger artist in my eyes. And like his style, like I was wondering because I've never seen him do anything else but Power Rangers, so I was wondering how that style will translate to another story that wasn't Power Rangers, and I think it does a pretty good job.
Yeah, I really liked it. We didn't talk about this the first time we discussed the book, actually, but a big part of the character design here, again, is what they're wearing, which is one of our favorites.
Yes, it is.
And I think that the artist, probably with the writer's help, did a really great job of giving us characterization through clothing and also some creature design. Um, really, the art is doing all of the heavy lifting here.
Right, right. And like Carrie Gillen is an artist, I mean, is a writer that I tend to like. And I wonder if this is going to be one of those books where it takes maybe like a year for it to be something. Because, we just read the first arc. So maybe like by the second arc, it's doing something. And we talked about this on the Lost episode. Is just that we've read a lot of superhero books, and like those tend to end in like doomsday like scenarios where the heroes have to come in, and like I think for like independent comics, the the what the comparison to that I guess would be the meta story. I think that's what you call it.
Right, right. You were pointing out last time that this is yet another story about the power of stories.
Right.
And it's that old write what you know thing. And it's like, hey, maybe comic book writers should be required to go to comic book summer camp so that they can do other things and find something else to write about besides writing comics.
Wow.
Just get them some hobbies.
I mean, look, the story is not bad. It's kind of interesting. I think it's interesting that like he's not a descendant of King Arthur, but somehow some weird like literature um descendant of Percival.
Mm.
Like, cause like most of these stories, right? It would it the story usually with these is that you're a descendant of King Arthur, yeah, yeah, yeah. That's how the story would usually go. So I like that they didn't quite do that. But at the same time, I think this might be the only clever thing they do, right?
Like I was saying, this easily could have been generic Arthurian themed fantasy without it being specifically going after obscure details of the Arthur mythos. It's also reminding me that I don't know that you're familiar with The Unwritten.
No, I don't think I am.
Which was a Mike Carey book coming out around the same time as Fables.
Okay.
Which was, both of these were metafiction, and both of them involved essentially the power of stories. And in the case of The Unwritten, it was about bringing stories to life essentially by bringing the details into the real world. So this pretty much just, now that I'm thinking about it, feels like a B plot from that comic series.
Wow. Okay.
A somewhat interesting idea. It's not surprising to see someone take this on. It's executed well enough. It's just like, I don't know, it just didn't spark anything for me, anything new.
I feel like this would make a good Saturday morning cartoon.
Yeah.
And like, I think that's another problem with the book is I think it has a hard time in its tone because it doesn't seem quite graphic enough not to be, for lack of a better term, kiddie. Like, I hate that term, but like this feel like it almost feels like a YA or all ages book. With an exception of a couple of things.
And it's not to say that there weren't fight scenes in it. There was definitely some bloody monster chopping up that happened.
Right. And I think that's the only thing that like tips it over into more like not adult or older stuff. But like to me, this has all of like the makings of like a YA comic in a lot of ways.
I feel like it was missing stakes a little bit.
Right.
At no point was I really concerned that the main character was in peril.
Right. And it seems that it even ends like a pilot, right? Like with him and his grandma and him going after the questioning beast.
Yes.
So it even ends like a TV show pilot. Like, you know, I wonder. Now that we've talked about it, I wonder did Kerry Gillen have that like in the back of his mind when he was doing this, that this might be a cool Netflix TV show at some point.
I mean, a lot of writers do think and write that way, and it's not necessarily always them hoping that it'll be a series. Sometimes it's just cultural osmosis that we think in story units that size now.
Right. So, Amanda, would you recommend this book?
Going back to my old outhouse standards, I would say that you could trade weight on this one. I would not add it to my pull list. Maybe if somebody had a copy, I would borrow it, but I wouldn't go very far out of my way to keep reading it.
Right. Okay. So from there, I guess we'll move on to, I think, something that's going to be a little more meatier for us to talk about.
Meteor?
Yes. Yes. Meteor. Okay. Today, we are talking Two Brothers. Two Brothers is a 2015 graphic novel published by Dark Horse Comics. It is written and drawn by real-life twin brothers Fabio Moon and Gabriel Ba. It's an adaptation of the 2000 novel The Brothers, written by Milton Houghton. It won the 2016 Eisner for Best Adaptation. Amanda, could you please read the synopsis?
Yeah, I've got a plot summary from the Dark Horse website where you can order a copy. Twin brothers Omar and Jacob may share the same features, but they could not be more different from one another. After a brutally violent exchange between the young boys, Jacob is sent home from Brazil to live with his relatives in Lebanon, only to return 5 years later as a virtual stranger to the parents who bore him. His tensions with Omar unchanged. Family secrets engage the reader in this profoundly resonant story about identity, love, loss, deception, and the dissolution of blood ties. So,
So Amanda, what did you think of Two Brothers?
um, I absolutely love this book. It's one of my favorites.
Right, right. Did you know it was an adaptation?
Yes.
Okay, I had no clue. And they actually
I
made
mean, it doesn't really matter. It's not like it's an adaptation of a book we would have really been able to get a copy of.
right because it's in Brazilian, I believe. Right,
Portuguese, yes.
Portuguese. I think is Brazilian even a language, or that's just me being a dumb American?
Um, you know what? I would say there's probably a Brazilian version of Portuguese.
Okay, thank
And I
you.
know that there's indigenous languages spoken in Brazil. Like, I wouldn't assume that somebody from Portugal could just walk around Brazil comfortably. So I think you're safe.
Okay, thank you. I even looked this up on Audible, see if they had a copy. There's not. What draws you to this story, Amanda?
I love the sense of realism
Right.
that these feel like real characters, real people. I love that there isn't a happy ending necessarily,
Right.
or that maybe if the story had ended at a different point, it may have been a happy story,
Mhm.
but that it kept going.
Mhm.
I love how I love the artwork, which is very stylized. And I love how as you get engaged with the story, it kind of disappears. And it just becomes kind of a seamless experience. And the artwork really helps the story towards the end. So in the beginning, it feels sort of, it takes you a while to adjust. And by the end, you're speaking the visual language that the artists have.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
So this is, one of the things I love is stories that are good as graphic novels or comic books, specifically in that genre. And I think this is a really good example of that. I think it just is a really great way of showing all of the different kinds of love
Right.
and the good and the bad sides at the same time.
Yeah. So, for me,
Yes.
the one word I would describe this book is epic, which is a weird thing to say about a family drama,
Mm.
but everything about this tale feels epic. I can't really explain it. I can't tell you why, but like just there's such a passage of time, and like the people change, people get older. It just feels like a movie. If this was a movie, this is like a movie they probably made like in the 50s or something. I don't know. Where like like an overly long movie, and like it just all these cast of characters. It's hard to explain. All I know is that's just how I felt. It felt like The Godfather just minus the gangster parts in a lot of ways.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Just that's kind of what just like taking in this family over a 50-year history and seeing all the ups and downs, and like the passion and the rage and anger. Every it feels almost Shakespearean. It feels like a Greek tragedy in all the things that it's doing. Like when you go, I can't remember anybody's name, but the mother and the father, right? When he tells the story about how he meets her, right, and how he basically write a note,
Yes.
and then he just goes up and just tells her, like all of that feels like you feel that, you know what I'm saying? You feel like the love that they have for each other, and the lust and everything else. Like you feel it when like Omar punches was it Jacob in
I
the
think
face?
so.
Yeah, in the face. You, you feel that shit. You feel like the years of tension building up, and the release of it. It's really quite remarkable.
I'm glad that you enjoyed it because I do think it requires almost a chapter to really get into it.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's funny because when I suggested this, you looked at the page count, and it's quite a lot of pages. I have the hardcover copy and it's 240.
Right.
Um, but their art style at some points is purely visual,
You don't even need
which
words.
allows you, it allows you to go a little bit faster. So you can read it in one sitting.
Right.
And sort of these cinematic mood establishing details where they kind of slow the story down. I think that contributes to what you were saying about it feeling epic. And making the house and the city where they live sort of the character. I
Um.
think it's also impressive that with the stylized artwork, you can still recognize who the characters are
Yes,
as they get
ma'am.
older and when you see them in flashbacks.
Right.
It's hard for me to put my finger on exactly what they do that makes that work out for me, but
Well, I can tell you exactly what they did. I think this is something modern comic book artists don't do a lot of nowadays. Is every face is distinct. Everybody has like a different design, even
this
in
is
black,
true.
even in black and white, right? Because like we've read a lot of comics, some in black and white, some in color. Well, like everybody kind of look the same. Like they might have different colored hair, they might have different, but like I could tell everybody apart like easily, right? Like whether it be like a couple of lines under the eyes, or like a beard, or the way someone's chin is shaped, or in the case of Omar and Jacob, one brother hair is fully black while the other one has a white streak at the top.
Yeah.
So like it's really easy to like tell everyone apart. It what gives this the art is very complex, but it looks easy. If that makes any sense.
Oh, yeah, I know exactly.
There,
It's
there's some thousand
it's
love.
good. It's good art when we can't talk about it with words
Right, right,
because there's
exactly.
something about it that's beyond words.
So there's a couple of things I like to bring up about this book, right? One
Yes.
being I think is something that like people try to downplay, and that's grudges from childhood. Like grudges from childhood can carry over, right? It's something that you don't see a lot of. It's always taught to you as you're an adult. You're supposed to grow out of that. You're supposed to be a bigger person. Both of you, like everybody had life changes. Now sometimes you just hate a motherfucker from 5 to now, and it's just the way it is. Like you know what I'm saying? It's that weird thing of where like as a kid nothing counts, but in a way it does count because you are who you are even at 5, right? So even at like what was they 12, 13,
Yeah.
Omar was already a son of a bitch, and there was almost no redeeming him. Just from the jump as a kid, and like it seems silly that him and his brother will hold that grudge. What was he going? Jacob was gone 5 years,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's still there. They're like 17, but it's still there. What do you have anything to say about this, Amanda? Do you hate anybody from childhood still?
I do. I have
Wow.
thanks for asking. No, I agree. I think that's part of the reality of it that I appreciate is that normally a story about a grudge is about successful reconciliation.
Right.
And to see a story where it just sort of sometimes, for some stretches of time, it kind of fades, but it never fundamentally goes away.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, given the circumstances, I don't know. I mean, I'm an only child, right? You're an only child too, yes?
Uh, no, I have.
Essentially, though, right?
Yeah. I'm 12 years apart from all my siblings, so yeah, on either side. So yes, essentially I'm an only child. Yes.
It's just it's I can imagine having a sibling that my parents treat differently from me,
Right.
but I couldn't imagine having a twin who gets treated differently.
For no good reason either. For no real good reason. Like,
Yeah.
is it ever explained why the
Um,
mother prefers Omar?
it's they do say that when they were infants, he was sick,
Right.
and so she had to care for him more carefully, and that, she just essentially kept spoiling him after that. Um, I think it may also be implied that he took after her father a little bit more,
Yeah.
and she was very much in love with her father.
Yeah. There's some weird sexual politics going on in this book. We'll get to that in a second. Um.
But yeah, but it is no good reason, even if there is a reason.
Right. Right. So, like, another thing they do too, and I've always found this funny, because it's something I always think about in real life, is, when they have like when they show like a picture of a serial killer and they have a documentary about it, they always show pictures of them as kids, and they look perfectly normal and innocent. You like, how the fuck you get from this to that, right? So like they kept showing the picture of them, they kept showing the family picture of them as little boys, and everybody is happy, and you thinking to yourself, how the fuck they get from this happy, smiley family to this? And they kept showing that picture, just that it was just that constant contrast, right? Of like this smiling, happy family in this picture when they two little boys, to like these warring brothers as they get older. You know what I'm saying? It's something I always think about, and it's funny that they do it in this book, and they do it well. Let's see. So the other thing I want to talk about is a subject that I don't even look. There's a lot of sets in this book, right?
Yeah,
Like a lot, but like
but
beyond
like
just,
real sex.
yeah, like real sets, and not and just beyond like quote unquote sets. It's mm, I don't even know how to talk about this. I don't even know how to relate this to people. But the sets in this book resonates with me in a way, which sounds weird, but like, well, look, they was rich for where they were, right? But they really wasn't rich, but they was rich for where they were, right? But they was more or less like, they're very much like an ethnic family. It's that weird thing of where like Americans have hangups about sets that like other places don't, right? And like you see in the eyes of the what's the housekeeper girl name?
Dominga?
Domingo, right? Well, she's a little girl, but she's constantly spying on her benefactors having sex, and they're not even really hiding it, right?
Yes.
And it seems weird, right? But what I know is like, but yeah, but what I know is that like, how can I say this? Lower incomes and like in other countries, but like in lower income areas, sex is that easily accessible and thrown around like that. You know what I'm saying? It just is. And like at first it was kind of weird. Then I remember how I grew up. Like, you used to you just used to see shit. No one never meant for you to see it, but they also never meant to hide. But they never really tried to hide it. And there's a lot of that, like little kids watching people have sex. A lot of peeping tummy going around. Did that strike you as odd at all, Amanda?
Um, no, not really. And I mean, that's also seems sort of consistent with like what I know about Brazil.
Right, you know what I'm saying? Like at one point, he's like butt naked carrying her upstairs, and she just stand and Dominga just standing there. You know what I'm saying? It just
I mean, I think that those scenes were sort of included to show that they were a family that was open about physical love, but also because the father had a lot of resentment about the kids.
A lot.
Specifically because he didn't get to have sex as much after they had kids.
Right.
And so I think that this was sort of meant to show the clashing of those two lifestyles.
Yes.
And that he seemed to be able to ignore or tolerate Dominga is also consistent with he had sort of preferential treatment for her. He was okay with her. He was okay with her grandson. I even thought for part of the story that he could be the father of her
Right.
son.
Right. I thought that too.
So, her just being around it seemed, showing her as a child around it with the parents also explains how she could tolerate Omar a little bit better.
Right.
Because I don't know if I think if she'd come to that family as an adult worker, servant, whatever her exact relationship was, domestic worker, I don't know that she would have just tolerated it if she hadn't grown up with it, essentially.
Right. Right. So let's get into the other thing. Does what you call it have sex with his auntie? Is that what I'm meant to believe?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. That was interesting, right? Like I'm picking out these parts in the book because I didn't think the book would go that way,
Right.
but it does. And again, it seems icky, it seems gross, but somehow truthful at the same time.
Yes.
Even her reaction to it, right? Which, from what the boy says, was she never did that again. She never mentioned it. She never says anything about it. It just happened one night.
Yes.
Yeah, so the question then goes: does she know that that's her nephew?
I'm sure they all did.
Right, right, right. So, do you have anything to say about any of this, Amanda?
Um, I think that one of the things is bringing up, one of the things that's interesting is that this is talking a lot about how romantic and familial love get entangled.
Right.
And like that does really resonate with me because um, I love my husband. In my life, I do think I've loved other men,
Right.
but I've never also wanted to be family with anyone else.
Okay.
And so having showing how those two sort of interact with each other, I think is really interesting. The idea that like you love your children one way, you love your husband one way. When he becomes a father, you love him a different way.
Right.
When you bring children into your family, you love them one way. Um, so I think confronting some of that strangeness is really interesting to me.
Right.
Doesn't mean I want to have sex with my nephew, but
No, no,
um,
no, no. I know that. I know that. But like, it's. I'm not talking about the sex because it's titillating. It's just such a huge part of this book in a lot of ways.
well, so I guess that's the thing, is that there is this buildup of he's lived in this family, he's loved this family, he's grown up looking at this woman and not necessarily thinking of her as his aunt, because even though it was an open secret, he really didn't know who his dad was.
Right.
Um, so, I mean, like, I think the consummation there is like an interesting turning point for him. And yet not.
Right.
Like it's not like it changed his life. And that's kind of what
It's just something that
that's kind of
happened.
real. Yeah, that's especially like I'm thinking about like, oh, like I thought that, graduating high school was it didn't change anything.
And
Um,
and we should talk about the fact that he's a boy and she was like a fully grown woman. So there's like some like weird molestation going. I mean, look,
it was after his 18th birthday.
it was.
Yeah.
Oh, see, I'm
And she was also the youngest sister.
okay. So maybe not that much of a difference.
I mean, she was absolutely
Older,
like older, and she was also, I mean, her family what owned him. So
Eh,
there's other types of coercion going on there, or at least a power dynamic where, you know, but
yeah.
I think he was into that power dynamic.
I just about to say, you know how I feel about that. I'm about to say, don't. Well, you call power dynamic you want to. I think he enjoyed it. So
But
anyway,
I mean, you can imagine that. I mean, it's essentially his boss.
right, right.
But yes, he was technically 18. I believe this was actually like the day after his 18th birthday.
Okay.
So,
You know what? Honestly, it would have been a lot more realistic if he was like 15. If I'm being honest.
yeah, I also found that birth date conspicuous.
Okay, good. Because I was just like, if we're being real, just from life experience and what we know, he would have been about 15. She's been about 25. That's usually how
I
that
mean,
works.
that was how the parents were.
Right, 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 right. Which again, I like. Not that not that I condone 25-year-olds marrying 15-year-olds, but different cultures have different standards. You know what I'm saying? And it's good that they didn't try to wipe that away or necessarily make it seem like the most evilest thing in the world. Cause for that culture, that's just normal, especially back then in what 1920 something.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we also see is sort of the long-term consequences of that is the mother having a degree of immaturity
You think?
and sort of, yeah, I mean, I think that having twins and then picking a favorite is not the best idea. I think that her not even being able to
Right,
finish having a relationship with her father as a daughter before she had to be a mom
right.
uh didn't help.
Also, but you know what? We say that right, but it also seemed like she was in charge. If that, if we're being honest, like it seemed like she's the one that was driving the manipulation train in that relationship.
With her
You know,
father?
no, with her husband, it's like she used sex as like to kind of get what she wants from him.
Yeah.
Like so like is that weird thing where yes she's 15 or maybe by the time they had kids she might be 20 by the time they have kids, but like she's younger, she's like at least 10 years younger than him, but she clearly has the power, if that make any sense, in a
Mm-hmm.
lot of ways. Yeah, 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 like he even want them damn dirty ass kids, but he couldn't say no to her. Which I also like. I also like the idea of like a man just desiring his wife and nobody else all through the years. You don't see a lot of that. A lot of these stories, a lot of times, I always someone always end up cheating. So I like that this didn't happen in this story. That like in a weird, dysfunctional way, he loved and desired his wife right up to the end.
Yes.
Okay, so let's I guess we really ain't talked about the protagonist. in the protagonist slash antagonist in this story, which is Omar and Jacob.
Is it?
Huh?
You don't think this is about Nail, the Dominguez son, the narrator?
You know what? Yay and nay, yay and nay, right? Because he's he's telling the story, but it's a lot. There's a lot of them in this story, almost more than he is. The thing is, well, number one, there's a lot more Omar than there is Jacob. Jacob, for a lot of it, it's almost like a spectre across this book. He's like a ghost.
I was going to say they talk about the two brothers a lot, but I don't know that they're in the story that much. And I don't know if it's a story about them.
I feel like the story is about them, but maybe they're not the antagonist or protagonist. But I do believe the story is about them. I don't think it's about him. Even though you're right, technically, I guess he would be the main character. Because this story is clear about how these two dudes hate each other. But let's talk about them for a second. I think they're both tragic and despicable in their own special way. And I love that this book does that for both of them. Where they're both just kind of like tragic and bastards at different points in the story. Right?
Yeah.
So, like, when you think about Omar, right, he's very much a man that lives, like, by his passions more than anything else. And, like, honestly, I felt that shit when he comes in drunken and bald-headed, and his father said, you know, he prefers to be a whoremonger at home, well, like, with the comfort of the family, than he ever would, like, live in, like, a humble life with just one woman. Like basically, it's like self-sabotage. It's this strange mix of self-sabotage on his part and manipulation on the mother part. But, like, he's such an enemy to himself that any resemblance of a good life he could have had, he just throws away knowingly. How do you feel about Omar?
It was very frustrating.
Okay.
He's the sort of person where this is an off-topic comparison, but my friends and I sometimes like to read these money diaries that go up on this online magazine where rich people from New York keep track of all the money they spend in a week. And, and then, I don't know, it's like living vicariously through people. But there was this one woman who every week, according to her money diary, she would go and she'd spend a ton of money getting sloshed on a Saturday night. And then she would wake up Sunday and be hungover and order takeout and not leave the apartment. And then Monday she would be like, oh no, I feel so bad. And she would go to like a spa and get like a massage and get like a cleansing, detoxifying treatment or something. And she would do all of this self-care during the week because she felt like shit. And then she'd feel great on Saturday and go out again. And she wrote all of this out, and you just wanted to take it and put it in front of her and go, the solution is right here. You've written down the solution to your problem. Like, everyone else can see it. That is Omar. Like, he has written down the solution to his own problem. He can solve his own problems. He just doesn't want to. Everyone else can see. It's so obvious. He just needs to do, like, literally anything. And people like him, they'll help him. So it's very frustrating.
And that's another thing too. You do get that sense that everybody seems to like Omar, despite the way he is. Like he's a charmer.
Yes.
Yeah.
I did mean to look up the writer that he was friends with, because I believe it is implied that he was politically active, possibly, yeah. But I'm not really familiar with exactly what was happening in Brazil. And this would have been the end of the 40s.
Okay, let me ask you something. Did you get maybe? I hate to say this. Not even I hate to say it, but like Do you get maybe like a gay vibe? Maybe like that, like he might have been lovers with dude, or that's just me projecting? Is that just me projecting?
I did not remotely consider that.
Because like when I see something in a foreign country about someone being super political, super liberal, and it take place like in the past times, I just feel like they just beat you and kill you because you gay. Like that's just what I assume because everybody was such a bigot back then.
Um, that that's pretty insightful. That could be what happened.
And it
That would
seems
also explain why he didn't want to be right there at the funeral.
right, and it seems that like apparently he had like a poet soul that he didn't know quite what to do with
Mm,
because no one ever nurtured that in him. Because for his mother to nurture that, that mean he would leave, and God knows she wasn't gonna have that. She couldn't have her son be happy without her. Could we touch on the racism, the slight racism,
yeah.
because he found an African woman, and it was just like,
I mean, they had an they had an indigenous woman who they got from nuns for free living in their house. So, yeah.
but just just the idea of like, how dare you date like this dark skinned woman? It's weird how like that shit even permeates even in Brazil, right? It's kind of strange. Not even strange, just kind of fucked up. Just like no matter the era, just people just seem to dislike black people somehow.
Yep. Sorry, it sucks.
I mean for it to take it like I mean take it in a dark place like that per se, Amanda. I'm just saying, don't you think it's interesting like how much? Well, to be fair, she like none of the women that he brought home. To be
Right.
fair, if we're being fair, but she really has something against the dark skinned lady.
Yes.
Yeah.
It may also be because in addition to her being not, and it wasn't just black, it was like African and
Right.
also like 6 feet tall.
Right.
Um, that she also may have been involved with some con scheme criminal organization as well. Um, but he ran away with her and they were living on like a small fishing boat hiding out. So maybe it was legit.
Right. 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 But so, what do you
So
think
that's
of?
interesting. I'm really surprised I didn't consider the gay angle and was just like he was probably a communist or something.
I mean that too. Like I just look. There's a
Why
lot of
not
weird.
both?
Right. There's a lot of weird stuff in this book, and at some point, I'm just expecting for like the craziest stuff to happen, but it don't quite does that. Like it doesn't quite go to the most extreme thing is what you call it having sex with his auntie, right? But I really thought like there was gonna be some type of molestation. I really thought like Omar and his mom might have had sex at some point because that's just how strong their relationship was. It's very what is it? OP? What was it? What was that Shakespeare thing?
Oedipal?
Oedipal. Thank you.
It is spelled with an O though, I think.
Yeah, it is. Look, it's one of those words that I see all the time, but never said out loud.
What are you reading that you see that all the time?
Amanda, I read a lot of stuff. Don't.
Okay.
But I know about that. Yeah, there's very much a lot of that in there. So I wouldn't have been surprised if at some point she tried to have sex with her son, or she did. Because apparently, like they both had sex with Domingo, one by force and one like for real, like not for real, but like one not by force. And like this, it's never come. So and like and the only reason we know is because she shows up with a child at some point, right? But it's never explicitly said until much later that
Right.
Jacob and Omar had sex with her, had sex with Dominga. right?
Yes.
So so I was just expecting. So I just thought maybe Omar might have been a little gay, like that could have added to his frustrations. But again, that's just a reading that I had, and like it may not be true.
Well, he's probably he could be bisexual.
What? Okay, yes,
To
bisexual.
be fair, I don't know if a gay man could pretend to have sex with that many women convincingly.
That is true. That is true. But maybe he was struggling with that. But again, that was just a reading that I had because when you have a close knit family like that, shit gets weird after a
Hmm.
while. Like shit gets weird, and like shit just become normalized after a while. So I could definitely see something like that happening. So Amanda, what do you think of Jacob?
Um, he was Mr. High Road. Um,
Was he though?
no, no, I mean he thought he was taking the high road,
Right.
but he was standoffish, cold, petty. He was just kind of planning to get out of there as quickly as possible once he was brought back. I think that it's not completely clear. I mean, neither of them really let it go when he left their fight.
Hmm.
I mean, if he was really the bigger person, he would have forgotten about it. Um, so yeah, I mean, Jacob's just a bad person in a different way.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
he's a bad person in the way that society approves of. He's
And
quiet, he's successful, he doesn't punch people, well, he sometimes punches people. He doesn't make as much noise, he's nice to people. I don't know. He's one of my friends would say that he's a nice person, but not a good person.
right, right. And like there's this weird form of gaslight between him and Omar. Well, Omar is clearly the antagonist, right? But like Jacob sets up a lot of things to make Omar look even worse, right? And
Mm,
like to the point where like Omar anger towards Jacob a little bit is almost justified, but nobody sees it that way because it's Omar, right? So it's just like it's almost like Omar like screaming to the clouds and no one like screaming to the sky and no one is listening because Jacob has done such a good job of just turning everyone against him, right?
yes.
Yeah, yeah. So Amanda, is there anything else you would like to say about this book?
Well, I mean, I want to go back to Nail, um
Okay.
the
Yes.
narrator, just because I mean, my reading of the book is that this boy is explaining who he is by describing the family that he came from,
Right.
and that if there is any resolution of this story, it's in him and any of the lessons that he learned from seeing how the two brothers were destructive.
Right.
Um, so I mean, I think he's supposed to be like the stand-in for the reader.
Yes. And I would call him a blank slate, but there's a couple of times where he springs to life.
Mm,
Right? It's when Omar just beating the crap out of Jacob, he like pushes like he like wrestles him off of Jacob into the yard. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying? Like oh okay. You know what I'm saying? So there's little moments like that where he comes to life, but like not necessarily that is my problem. It just he's kind of a blank slate in a lot of ways, but that's on purpose, right? He's a narrator. He can't. He's a narrator. He's narrating a story where he's not the main character, so it's hard for him to have too much of a personality, just by the function of his role in the story.
yeah.
But no,
Um,
no, no. I do find him interesting in because like what type of life is that, right? Where like you're part of a family but you're not, right? Where you feel love but maybe not quite the love you would want. If that make any sense.
yeah, it absolutely makes sense.
Like he's like 1 foot in but 1 foot out. Like what? Like what type of childhood is that? Is that even a childhood to begin with?
Uh, no, no, I just wanted to circle back and revisit I mean, essentially the son of the brothers.
Who you think the baby daddy is?
I don't know. I don't think it matters,
And you know what? You can even take a DNA test
right?
because because they're twins. But again, apparently the rape happened because of another peeping tom situation, in the fact that Omar seen them together in her
Yes.
bedroom, which just enraged him, and he does like that unspeakable act.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, man. Would you recommend this book?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, okay. I definitely will recommend this book too. So Amanda, if they want to talk to us about past childhood traumas, what could they reach us?
We're on Twitter as Comic Book Club 52.
Uh huh.
They could send us an email, comicbookclub52 at gmail. And we're on Facebook where we share our episodes as the Comic Book Club.
Right. So, um, the next time we'll do a show, it'll be October. And last year it was Batman month. So I don't know if we'll do a whole month of Batman, but I do want to do one Batman story. And the story I want to do is actually a sequel to the book we did last year, A Long Halloween. There's a sequel
The
series.
longer Halloween?
The even longer Halloween. No, Dark Victory, written by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale.
Okay.
So that's what we'll be reading next time on this show. All right, Amanda, this has been a good show. Thank you for recommending this book. You know, we've been reading a lot of superhero stuff, so it's great to break up that with some that's not that.
Some quote unquote art.
Yeah, some art and yeah, exactly,
And
exactly.
I would say this does qualify as impress your friends art.
It
Um,
does.
but it's the right length and it's just challenging enough. So yeah, one of my
Yeah,
favorites. Thank you
right.
for reading it.
All right. So I'm Jamil Payne,
I'm Amanda Comey.
and we are out.